Good morning. Today I feel led to share with you how I learned through the birth of my second born child how fear can stop God's plans. Shortly after my daughter was born, the Lord had me studying the Israelites and how he took them from the land of Egypt to the promised land. There was much trials, many miracles, and lots of time as they journeyed along the way. One thing that stood out to me is God would continually show himself faithful, but the people would find that it wasn't what they expected and they would start to grumble and complain. They did this a total of 10 different times. Now, here in Numbers 14, I find myself in the part of their testimony when the Israelites are right outside the promised land after about a year and a half of traveling through the wilderness, seeing God's miracles, and they're grumbling, complaining, wondering what in the world is going on. At the Lord's command, Moses sends in 12 spies to spy out the promised land and see what it's like, see what the people are like. A total of 12 spies went in. And at the conclusion of their journey, 10 of them said, "It is a land flowing with milk and honey, but the people there are giants and we're like grasshoppers to them." They were basically saying, "We're going to die." And they didn't believe they could do it. So they gave this bad report to the congregation of Israel. And on the other hand, there was two other spies, Joshua and Caleb, who said, yeah, there is giants, but God is our God. We're the one in covenant with him. We can do this. And the congregation was given both this bad report and this good report. But in fear, they believed the bad report and actually began to pick up stones to kill Joshua and Caleb for believing and declaring and speaking the word of God. God ended up smiting those who gave the bad report. And for all those who believed the bad report because of their fear of the giants, they would never enter the promised land. They would have to stay in the wilderness for 40 years until they died. But Joshua and Caleb and the children of the unbelieving Israelites would be the ones to go and receive the promise of God, which it now comes to me. In my own life, just the year before, I had a C-section. It was crazy. It was chaotic. There was yelling. There was arguing. There was pressure. There was Pitocin. There was just chaos and frustration. And it all came rushing at me. I couldn't think clearly. And I just thought, I don't want to do that again. And I asked the Lord, if it's possible for me to have a VBAC, can you encourage me? Can you give me a dream or something? And he did. My daughter, who was due on Christmas Eve, I had a dream that she was born next to the Christmas tree with the presents still wrapped, and it was a vaginal birth. And I took this as encouragement from the Lord that it would happen and I didn't have to worry about going through what I already went through. But as the days went on and my belly got bigger and her due date got closer, my heart began to race and I became afraid. I started to lean on my own understanding and not acknowledge the Lord and tried to figure out, how can I make sure this VBAC happens? And I remembered the year before, my water didn't break by itself. So perhaps if I can cause my water to break this time before I'm overdue, I can make sure and rush the process so that I never get to the point of them even discussing a C-section. Not remembering that actually the year before, after they did the Pitocin and all their things, it was actually the nurse who broke my water. So I don't know why I thought me breaking the water would cause a different result. So what did I do? At 38 weeks, I broke my own water. Bad idea. What I came to realize after the fact is that fear is not an excuse for disobedience, but that's exactly where it leads us. In Hebrews chapter 3, verse 12, it says, "Beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God." The Bible calls a heart of unbelief evil because when you don't believe God, or when you halfway believe Him, but you're full of unbelief and you're double minded, you become unstable in all your ways, as James says, you disobey Him. We can feel fear, yet remember and obey God. We don't have to obey fear just because we hear it and just because we feel it. We can obey God's voice, and that will cause our feelings to change. Intimacy with the Lord leads to faith in the Lord. And when you have faith in the Lord, you obey the Lord. And when you obey the Lord, you experience His love for you. And when you experience His love for you, you experience His love coming out of you, and you love Him back. Because when you obey God, you see His goodwill come to pass in your life, and you see His love, and it causes you to love Him back. For example, in 1 Samuel 17, we find King David as a boy facing Goliath. And the reason he was so bold in facing Goliath, one, he remembered his God, and he remembered that he was in covenant with his God. And two, he remembered his testimony. He remembered that when he was watching his father's sheep, the Lord helped him overcome bears and overcome lions. And he faced that giant in victory. We also see in Joshua chapter 14, after the 40 years had passed, plus 5 more years, and now the Israelites are beginning to take the promised land. Caleb, who was now 85 when he had previously been 40 the last time he had been here, remembered, and he was the same way at 85 that he was at 40. And he communicated, "I want that mountain. I want this land, and I'm just as strong today as I was all those years ago, and I'm still ready to take those giants," just like I said back then. And he did, even at 85 years old. And Joshua and Caleb and the Israelites had many victories. Everything they said in the past wasn't true. They were not grasshoppers. They were able to take the land flowing with milk and honey despite the giants and despite the obstacles, because they believed God and obeyed God and not fear. In conclusion, I realized after the birth of my second born, my daughter, that even though God has these good and perfect plans for us, that if we allow an evil heart of unbelief to get inside of us to cause us to listen to the voice of fear, or even the voice of Satan or anything else, such as Adam and Eve did in Genesis chapter 3, we can stop God's plans for us. But the good news is, seeing God's love, faithfulness, and character causes us to love Him and makes us want to obey Him. 1 John 4:19 says, "We love Him because He first loved us." And Jesus says in John 14:15, "If you love me, keep my commandments."